The painting we are examining is titled Mephisto and was created in 1895 by a German artist whose name you have probably never heard before. Mephisto is a shortened form of the name Mephistopheles, a demon who appears in the Faust myth, which became quite popular throughout Europe toward the end of the Middle Ages. However, what truly makes this painting interesting is not this reference itself, but rather how the artist chose to depict this demonic figure. We are usually accustomed to seeing demons portrayed as horned, winged, or grotesque-faced monsters. Here, however, we see none of that. Instead, the demon appears as an elderly man, dressed in a red suit, elegantly leaning forward, with an expression that is difficult to define. He is smiling, yet we cannot be sure why. Rather than looking like a creature straight out of hell, Mephisto gives off an unsettlingly human impression. He looks like someone you could easily pass on the street, or someone who might stop you to start a conversation. And this is actually extremely meaningful. In the Faust myth, Mephisto, or more precisely Mephistopheles, is the demon who makes deals and collects souls. The story begins with Faust, a cultured, intelligent, and highly ambitious man who nevertheless suffers from a deep sense of dissatisfaction. He has knowledge of nearly everything, including astronomy, medicine, theology, and philosophy. Yet all this knowledge fails to give him what he truly seeks. What Faust wants is more knowledge, more power, more experience. He wishes to transcend the limits of being human and reach a point no one has reached before. When he realizes that this cannot be achieved through ordinary means, he decides to look elsewhere. This is precisely where Mephistopheles enters the story. One day, Faust summons an infernal spirit, and the one who appears is Mephistopheles himself. He does not arrive as a terrifying figure, but as someone elegant and charismatic, and he presents Faust with an offer. He proposes a deal. For 24 years, Faust will have everything: unlimited knowledge, renewed youth, unrestricted pleasure, and anything he can imagine. In return, at the end of those 24 years, his soul will no longer belong to him. Faust accepts the offer. This deal, known as the Faustian bargain, becomes one of the most influential ideas in Western literature. It first appears in a popular German text in the late 16th century, but over time it grows increasingly complex. In 1592, English playwright Christopher Marlowe portrays Faust as a tragic figure torn between desire and guilt. In 1808, Goethe elevates the story to an entirely different level. In his version, Faust no longer seeks merely worldly pleasures. He searches for meaning itself and becomes a symbol of modern humanity, willing to risk everything for a purpose that gives life true significance. There is an important point that must be clarified here. Mephistopheles is not Lucifer. He is more of an intermediary, a messenger who acts on behalf of others. His power lies in how he presents himself. He does not use violence, force, or fear. On the contrary, he is seductive and rational. He seems to understand your desires and knows exactly how to fulfill them. That is precisely his role in this story. Not to force you, but to place an option before you, lay the contract on the table, and leave the decision to you. Because ultimately, this story is not just about selling one's soul, but about what you are willing to give up in order to obtain what you desire most. Although we have not mentioned his name until now, the artist who depicted Mephisto in this way is the 19th century German painter Eduard von Grützner. However, he was not the first to imagine this character. Over time, many artists have interpreted Mephistopheles from their own perspectives. One of the most well-known examples is Friedrich Moritz's August Wretch. In this work, we see Faust and Mephisto playing a game of chess. The board represents Faust's soul, and Mephisto moves the pieces calmly and confidently, as if he knew from the very beginning that he would win. Faust, on the other hand, appears uneasy and tense, as though he already senses his loss. This scene perfectly captures the essence of the myth. The demon does not attack, he simply waits for you to make the wrong decision. There are also other works that depict Mephistopheles as a much darker figure, For example, in one of Ujan Diakwa's most popular lithographs, the demon glides through the air with his wings spread and is presented as a far more grotesque being. When we compare these depictions with Grützner's work, the difference becomes strikingly clear. While other artists present Mephisto as a frightening figure, Grützner brings him entirely down to earth. He gives him a body, an age, a personality, and turns him into a real human being. When we look at this painting, we do not feel confronted by a supernatural threat. Instead, it feels as though we are face to face with someone who could sit beside us, look at us with that mocking expression, and start speaking. This is precisely the point at which his interpretation becomes especially disturbing. Eduard von Grützner created this work in 1895. In the painting, we see Mephisto slightly leaning forward, as if he is approaching us. He gives the impression that he has just made us an offer and is now waiting for our response. His body is turned slightly to the left, and his gaze follows the same direction, as if he is watching something, or someone, outside the frame. This creates an unsettling tension and makes us question whether something unseen is taking place. One of the most striking elements of this painting is Mephisto's clothing. The elderly man is dressed entirely in red. He wears a tightly fitted tunic, buttoned all the way up to the neck and adorned with carefully crafted details. On his head, he wears a red hat topped with an exaggerated feather. This feather is particularly significant. At the time, feathers were not commonly used in everyday hats. They were more closely associated with theatrical costumes or courtly attire. In classical texts by Christopher Marlowe or Goethe, Mephistopheles does not have a fixed appearance. At times, he changes form. At others, he disguises himself. In some passages, it is explicitly stated that he alters his appearance to avoid looking too threatening. In Marlowe's text, Faust asks him to assume a more pleasant, more human form. Therefore, this red, theatrical, and elegant costume is not an arbitrary invention by the artist, but a visual interpretation that aligns perfectly with the literary tradition. It represents the idea of a demon who gains power not through fear, but through seduction. Now let us turn to his face. His expression is quite complex. I cannot say that he is clearly smiling, but there is a subtle curve to his lips. He seems to be enjoying the moment in which he offers us temptation, plants a seed of doubt in our minds, and watches to see what we will do. If I were to explain why this painting is so disturbing, I would not say that it is merely because of the colors or the expression. What is truly unsettling is how human this demon appears. Grützner shows us neither a monster nor traditional symbols of evil. There are no horns, no flames. Instead, we see a man with an ordinary face, a confident posture, and a gaze that feels disturbingly familiar. Perhaps this is why it is so unsettling, because, almost unwillingly, you begin to associate him with someone. Maybe he reminds you of someone you once knew or someone you have seen somewhere before. Because in real life, temptation comes through real people and real faces. Evil rarely presents itself openly. It often appears as something logical, appealing, and even attractive. This is exactly what Mephisto represents. He does not need to spread fear in order to wield power. Looking normal is enough. Standing before us is not a fantastical creature, but a figure who could exist among us. Someone we may have unknowingly passed by countless times. Thank you for watching this video until the end. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. See you next time.